Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest masterclass from Logic and Magic. My name is Mike Van Rooyen, and I'm excited to be your host today, live on YouTube, StreamYard, and LinkedIn, as we're going to dive into the world of Drupal 7 and the impending end-of-life deadline. As we explore the implications of this change, you're going to gain valuable insights into how to future-proof your brand online. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. So my promise to you is that over the next 45 minutes or so, you're going to learn why Drupal 7 is about to reach its end of life, what that means for your existing Drupal 7 website, what support you have access to in order to beat the deadline, and what your next steps need to be and how quickly you're going to need to take them. Finally, at the end of the webinar, I'm going to explain how you can qualify for 1 hour of Drupal 7 end-of-life consultancy from us at Logic and Magic. So before we start discussing why it's not a suitable platform in 2024, we should take a moment really to appreciate the impact that Drupal 7 has had. Though they're calling time on the software, the Drupal team are rightly proud of the longevity and the accomplishments that Drupal 7 has achieved. When it was released, it was a sea change for their CMS products and has helped thousands of businesses like yours achieve their goals, increase revenue, improve brand awareness, and reach new heights. Its enduring popularity is a testament to its quality and the community's dedication to keeping it active for the last 13 years. However, as we approach the end-of-life deadline for D7, it's essential to acknowledge that though this remarkable CMS has served us well, it's now time to evolve. At Logic and Magic, we've had the privilege of working with numerous clients over the last few years who have made the strategic decision to migrate away from D7 and on to newer platforms. Like them, you've likely experienced the value and reliability that D7 has brought to your business, but as we'll find out, it's crucial that you prioritize modern technology and safeguard yourselves against potential vulnerabilities and external threats. First of all, what is end of life? Because that might be a new phrase to some of you. Well, end of life, or EOL, is the term used when software is no longer supported by the authors of it. The software still functions and runs as you're used to, but it's no longer actively maintained. As we're going to discover, that leaves stakeholders like you running end-of-life software in a difficult position. Do you invest in a new secure platform and face increased costs whilst trying to maintain it, or do you accept the risk of data breaches possible in the future? End of life is a normal stage in the development in the software lifecycle, and after all good things come to an end. But Drupal 7 stands out as being unusual as it's had such a long shelf life. So why is support ending for Drupal 7 right now? Well, since it was released in 2011, the way websites are designed and built have changed massively. The expectations of developers and CMS users and the end customer have all increased beyond what Drupal 7 can reasonably offer. At the time, developers were more often than not building everything from scratch, and Drupal 7 was no different, being built entirely on its own bespoke codebase. In the years after its launch, PHP frameworks like Laravel and Symfony really began to mature, and it meant that managing a proprietary codebase when other competitors in the market began to use more open source solutions, that just added unnecessary overhead to the Drupal team, as well as the developers building on the platform commercially. So since D8, the CMS has become more closely aligned to the Symfony component-based architecture. This allows Drupal to maintain their high standards in accessibility, privacy, and security, whilst focusing on delivering industry-leading CMS functionality that you as users expect today, rather than worrying about details of architectural design that are now provided by the underlying framework. If Drupal continue to support these legacy design decisions, time and effort is going to detract from the progress they can make on the newer versions that they're releasing, as well as slowing development across the community as a whole. This level of change was also seen in the associated technologies that people used, and this also impacted the CMS itself. Though the first iPhone was released earlier in 2006, Between 2011 and 2015, we saw a significant shift in how people accessed digital content, with more and more people browsing the web via mobile devices as they became more affordable. This sparked a whole new approach to the design and the development of websites, which D7 really couldn't keep up with. Newer versions of Drupal now provide core module support for responsive images, breakpoints, and require far less configuration to deliver mobile-first websites that are optimized for use on smaller screens or with low network speeds. Today, regardless of their device, customers expect lightning-fast load times, accessible and intuitive interfaces, as well as infallible system security. Though this is all achievable in D7, meeting the standards in CMSs like Drupal 10 is now much easier, and therefore the development costs paid by businesses like you are greatly reduced. I think going forward as well, unmanaged, these industry advancements will negatively impact your ability as a website owner to continually iterate on your D7 site. Over time, you might have already noticed a lack of developers willing to work on your older system, and increased costs maybe in doing even the most simple updates. It's most likely that because of reduction in D7 and legacy knowledge available within teams and across the wider pool of developer resources. Also, you should note that it's not all about the Drupal software itself. The server specifications required to host D7 sites have also been superseded. For example, PHP, the programming language which powers Drupal and many other open source CMSs, was running at 5.6 when as the latest version when D7 was launched. That's now at 8.3. The final PHP version that's going to be compatible with D7 is 8.2. That itself is going to lose active support from PHP in December this year and then reach its own end of life in 2026. This reduction in support across development and hosting is only ever going to result in additional costs for you and an ever-widening attack surface for those who want to exploit it. So with D7 struggling to remain relevant when compared to new versions across capabilities, standards, and cost-effective development and security, Drupal now confirmed that D7 is going to reach its end of life on the 5th of January 2025. And with that, all security updates, bug fixes are going to stop. There have been a few false starts along this journey to end of life for Drupal 7, but now this deadline is locked in and it's just 6 months away. So let's find out what that means for you. I think it is difficult not to sound hyperbolic, I think, when talking about D7's end of life. But it's very important to get across to you that from January 2025, your site will have a heightened risk of being affected by malicious attacks if you continue to run D7. All of the support from Drupal, which you have experienced over the last 13 years, is going to stop. And over time, you will find your installation will become more and more insecure when considering the progression of supporting software like PHP and MySQL versions over time. Running out-of-date software is just like driving a car with faulty brakes. It might seem like a distant concern, but the risks are real. Just as you wouldn't know when or where brake failure might occur, continuing to use D7 after January means that you're unaware of the vulnerabilities within your system until it's far too late. If you imagine driving down the motorway, unaware that a critical component is about to fail, the consequences could be catastrophic, just like a data breach can have devastating effects on your businesses and your brand reputation. If we consider only the business impact of continuing with a CMS that's running unsupported software, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see costs increase in line with the perceived risk by your suppliers. A lack of developers with relevant skills in D7 will naturally see a premium charge for any new features you request or your bug fixes that are needed. Hosting might require a more specialist and costly architecture or enhanced support to protect other sites on your server from security vulnerabilities. By replatforming to a supported version of Drupal, you're not only ensuring the security of your site, but you're also gaining access to new features, improved performance, and enhanced user experience. But you really need to start this journey today. So that's the impact of your website running D7 past January. But what about the impact on your brand's reputation if the worst should happen? That's where I think things get much more critical. The truth is, security risks can lead to data breaches, which can damage your brand's reputation and take a long time to recover from. It's not just a matter of calling your developers to fix the issue. You need to think about what processes, policies, and action plans are in place if customer data is stolen, malware or ransomware is introduced onto your network, or maybe your website's defaced. And it's not just about the operational cost of handling attack either. Have a think about how your brand might fare, because the impact could be really severe. From financial losses in fines, reputational costs from negative publicity, and the loss of consumer trust can all hit the bottom line in your business. You might think as well that you're a small target, so you might not be found and can get away without updating to the latest version. But the nature of attacks on outdated software, at least initially, is more of a scattergun approach, trying to identify vulnerable targets rather than targeting one specific organization. Then, through automation, attackers identify and exploit those unknown vulnerabilities that we now know are not going to be fixed past January. This can lead to devastating effects for both businesses and the individuals whose data is compromised. These two high-profile data breaches serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of running outdated software. Firstly, Mossack Fonseca is better known as the Panama Papers data breach and happened in 2016. At the time, it was the largest data breach recorded, with 2.6 terabytes of data being stolen and published. The data was very sensitive and contained the financial information of very wealthy individuals, as well as many public officials, and had really wide-reaching consequences globally. The release of the documents led to prosecutions for fraud and tax evasion, amongst other things. And for many associated reasons with the breach, Mossack Fonseca ceased trading in 2018. Though the data was stolen from unencrypted emails and documents on the server, it was found that the likely starting point for the breach was the corporate website running an insecure but well-known image gallery plugin. The plugin allowed the whistleblower to access the server and move laterally from the website onto the other services which were running on it, and ultimately gain them access to the information that they would go onto and release. Similarly, the second example, Equifax, is the US-based credit checking agency. They announced in 2017 that they too had suffered a data breach which affected 150 million people worldwide. Those people included in the breach would have their names, their birthdays, and their other personal identifiable information compromised. And the size of the fine that Equifax were given, which was over $700 million, reflected the impact that those included in the breach might have experienced in their day-to-day lives. In that example, a server component was running an insecure version for which a patch had been released in March 2017, but it hadn't been applied until June of that year. Attackers managed to exploit the vulnerability for 79 days before it was identified, and in that time, it had allowed them to scan the Equifax database over 9,000 times and steal valuable private information. I think whilst these examples are extreme, they highlight the complexity of managing websites, servers, and other services which we rely on in the modern world. They show how managing the security of your website is just one part of your overall responsibilities, but identifies that websites is probably the only publicly accessible point, the publicly accessible access point to your network, and gives the ability for people to access other sensitive areas if it's not secured properly. So now let's have a look at what other considerations you should be making, as well as replatforming D7 to maintain the security of your systems. Though moving away from Drupal 7 is going to significantly improve your website security, it isn't the whole picture. Once you're on a secure and supported platform, it's so important to have a plan in place to manage your ongoing software patching strategy. As we've learned, developers tend to nowadays use a suite of pre-built open source tools to support their development activities. This benefits you as the cost of development is lower, and it should improve the quality of the output. It's not unusual for the number of external dependencies on a website to run into the tens, if not hundreds, depending on the complexity of the application. They provide functionality in the form of the CMS itself, plugins or modules providing important features, through to smaller packages that link the whole application together, both on the front and back ends, as well as the server. The trade-off in getting this head start in the development of your site is that you need to maintain a strong schedule of regular updates being applied as and when they're released over the lifetime of your application. And this includes managing patches, minor updates, and eventually major version changes. At Logic & Magic, we always see a positive impact in how efficiently updates can be applied when they're done regularly. As software becomes more out of date, even when it is supported, it becomes much more difficult to upgrade and requires more resources to apply, release, and test the changes. It's far more cost effective in the long term to allocate time and budget early to making sure that your software is as up to date as possible, rather than applying large changes later on. That same principle should be applied to your physical devices, your IT infrastructure, as well as your hosting. Though I think that's probably a masterclass for another day. The 5th of January will be a significant milestone in your business as you're running D7. So take the opportunity to fully modernize your website and then think about how to implement security best practices across your whole IT. If we pause there for a moment and maybe let all that information sink in, I'd just like to pose a quick question, really. Assuming that everybody is running a D7 site, I'm just wondering if you have plans in place that are going to manage your end of life before January. So if you do, please just put in the comments that yes, you do. And if you don't, put no. And let us know how concerned you are about that January deadline. Well, there's a few no's coming in there. I guess that's the reason why people are attending the webinar, to find out how to manage that risk. So whilst there are quite a few people who don't yet have a plan in place, being honest, there are many people still in your position who rely on D7 to power their businesses. I guess the good thing is that you're acting now and you're taking steps to mitigate that risk. There is, of course, still time. There isn't much time. There's probably about just enough to get a rebuild over the line. I think because of that time frame, there are really only two viable options available to owners of D7 websites today. Firstly, you can re-platform to another CMS. Logic & Magic is always going to recommend choosing Drupal 10, the latest Drupal version, but there are other CMS options available which might be suitable for your use case. Alternatively, you can have a look at our Drupal 7 end-of-life support package, but ultimately you do need to take some action in the next 6 months, as doing nothing and hoping for the best is an extremely risky decision to make. So let's first look at the option for re-platforming. I'll start by clarifying that unfortunately there is no automated or quick migration plan from D7 and onto the newer versions of the CMS as there are between D8 and D9 and D9 and D10. I'm sorry to say that the hopes of a quick click of a button upgrade are dashed, and the only way to consign your D7 site to the history books is to undergo a full rebuild. This does, though, present you with a fantastic opportunity for you to reposition or enhance your brand online. If you've been maintaining the same site for since 2015, though I'm sure you've applied some modernization over that time, now it's going to be in your interest to take stock of how your offer compares to your competitors. Consider if your content fully conveys your services or your organization's tone of voice now. Have you maybe always wished to have specific functionality that was out of reach of your D7 site? Or has the visual identity of your brand changed since you last updated? There are, of course, many more areas where a brand new site on a brand new platform is going to benefit your business, and now it really is the ideal time to look at it. In preparation, it will be useful at this point for you to document all the requirements, the integrations, and the business logic your new site would need, either if they're new ideas or need to be recreated from your existing platform. Performing this audit now will not only help you prioritize your project needs, but it also helps the development team in scoping and estimation of the build. At Logic and Magic, we generally follow a 3-phase process for delivering new websites. Discovery is the first stage, where we identify opportunities and optimization for the project through user research, content analysis, and user experience design. As I discussed in my last masterclass, SEO is a fundamental part of a replatforming project, not only from an on-page optimization point of view, but most importantly, how to manage the changes in URLs across your new information architecture. The build, of course, is where we define the scope of your requirements that is tailored to your budget before cracking on and delivering to the functional and non-functional requirements. After our testing processes and the launch is the fundamental post-launch schedule. This is where we agree on what level of ongoing development will be required for your investment, and of course agree a plan on those critical security updates that you need. We do appreciate, though, that the idea of starting a new website project can be quite intimidating, especially if you'll be undertaking it alongside your other responsibilities, your role. But our teams know this tried and trusted method for delivering digital products inside and out, and will guide you through that journey. Linked to that, I'm sure that everyone here today is very aware of how long a website development project can take, even with simple builds taking a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks. Therefore, it's crucial there's a definitive and realistic plan for the delivery of the project. Of course, whoever is building the project will guide you on timelines and deliverables, but as stakeholders, you need to be aware about the amount of time you need to commit to a project too. Even reviewing your existing content and updating that in line with your new information architecture, tone of voice or the message will take far longer than you have ever imagined. I think for me, most importantly, you need to make sure that you define your goals clearly for a project. Are you looking for a simple lift and shift to replicate your current D7 site, or do you want to improve conversions or focus on other customer success metrics? Knowing what you want to achieve before starting the project and communicating that to your designers and your developers will result in a much more successful outcome. Have a think about how your content will look on your new website, any competitor or comparator sites that you like and use, and also how you'd like your new brand to look within your new layout. Then your new features you'd like to introduce, or perhaps your D7 site has been over-engineered and you can now take the opportunity to de-scope functionality and speed up that rebuild. But most of all, you want to make sure that your new site works as hard for you as your D7 site has done in the past, and provide a return on your investment. So have a think about including ongoing search engine marketing and those different levels of post-launch support that you need. Once complete, your business will be running on an up-to-date CMS, benefiting from the latest technology, developer support, and will show off the best possible version of your brand online. But if you're not ready to start off on a replatforming project, Logic and Magic can provide a D7 support past January 2025 for a very limited time. This is a really short-term fix and is no way intended to provide security patches or bug fixing for D7's core code base or any community contributed modules that you might have installed. Instead, this package just allows you to make feature changes to your site and provide secure hosting, and probably most important of all, ongoing application monitoring, so we can kind of see what's going on in the background. Once it's been migrated to our secure hosting, our team will upgrade your site to the latest possible versions of D7 and any community contributed modules which are out of date before undertaking an in-depth site audit, which is going to cover security, compliance, accessibility, and page performance. Whilst we're in a keep the lights on mode and your website is functioning as you need, our primary concern at that point is going to be producing you a roadmap that's going to enable you to successfully migrate away from D7 as quickly as possible after January. From our audits, we'll have a really good understanding of your requirements and the processes that are running on your site, and then we'll be able to provide that definitive plan that you need and the cost estimates to make sure the project can kick off to get you onto a more secure CMS. So now we understand what Drupal end of life is going to mean for your website. And by that, in summary, is increased security risks, lack of ongoing support, and increased costs. The onus is now really on you to act. I've said it before, and it's worth repeating again, that the 5th of January is less than 6 months away. It might seem plenty of time sat here in summer because you've probably not started thinking about Christmas yet. But considering the amount of work involved in scoping, designing, and building a new website, coupled with reliance on developer schedules and your own internal resource, that time can get squeezed really, really quickly. However, you're armed now with the knowledge that you do need to take some action, and we've talked about some of your options as well. How you proceed next is going to depend on your organization's circumstances. So ask yourself, if D7 powers your entire digital business, does it provide complex functionality and loads of tightly coupled business integrations? You might have a fairly straightforward content-driven D7 site, but lack any external support from other providers. Also, maybe your D7 is managed by internal staff. Are they aware of the impact end of life is going to have on their systems? And do they have the skills or the knowledge to mitigate the risks, or maybe even re-platform in time? Knowing your exposure is going to help you guide on your choice of next steps, be that re-platforming now or take out short-term end-of-life support and carry the risk of vulnerabilities past January before re-platforming later. You need to identify the levels of support that you're going to need to get the job done successfully, whilst considering the availability of your internal stakeholders and the requirements on you personally. Don't forget, if you need to, reach out to a partner like Logic and Magic, who can not only provide the core requirements for the build, but also have the additional services like project management, brand and strategy, and content creation available to take away much of the heavy lifting from you during the build. Support from these trusted partners is invaluable when undertaking a project of this significance. So that is it, really. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll end by saying that I think time is so tight here that making the change from D7 is so critical to your business. Please make sure that if you take one thing away today, that it is that you need to kick off the process now. Whatever that next steps are and whoever you're going to take them with, I think today is the first day of that new project for you. We do have a few minutes available for any questions that people might have. If you do, just please add them in the chat. If I don't answer your question, I don't get around to it, please feel free to drop me an email or contact me on LinkedIn, and I will be absolutely delighted to get back to you after the masterclass. And I think whilst we wait for some questions to come in, if you do want to have a helping hand on your D7 platforming journey and would like a 30-minute call with me to talk about your existing D7 site and receive a plan on how to beat that end-of-life deadline in January, simply send me an email. My email address is on screen now with the subject Drupal End of Life. And the first person to do so will receive that free consultation with me. So let's have a look to see if there are some questions coming in. So the first one that's here is it possible just to replicate my existing D7 site on a newer version of Drupal? Yes, it is possible to recreate it, but primarily it's still going to be a real rebuild from scratch again. There might be some cost savings that you're able to make from reusing front-end CSS, for example, but essentially it would still be a full rebuild of the project. So it's worth considering the scope that you want to have in that. One question is, are there any tools that can help in the migration process? I think really because of the age and taking from D7 to D10, again, as I mentioned earlier in the masterclass, there isn't a click of a button kind of tool to do. We can maybe use some Drupal tools that could migrate some areas of the content, but again, I would pretty much bank on having to be a new project with a lot of manual content creation, content editing, and that kind of thing. Another one here. If I don't do anything, will my D7 site still work after the deadline? Yes, the deadline is not anything to do with affecting the functionality of websites or taking them offline. The January deadline is only to stop updates and support for the software from Drupal. After January, you are on your own. Your site will still work, but as I mentioned, it's much more open to vulnerable exploits from cyber attacks. And then possibly the last question here, how long would it take to migrate to your D7 support package? Well, I think the answer to that really is how long is a piece of string. Every site is going to be very different depending on how complex it is or the size of it. In general, I think for a decent sized content driven site, I would expect about a week to get access to the files, configure the hosting, of course, undergo a thorough kind of round of testing before updating the DNS. And then we'd go into that audit mode and start to design the roadmap to re-platforming. I think the whole process could take up to about 3 to 4 weeks. But as I mentioned, it really is a case of it entirely depends on the site that would be being supported. So that looks like kind of all the questions that have come in, and it's probably just about time to wrap it up for today. So just like to say thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful, and maybe I'll see you on my next masterclass. Thank you very much. Bye.